It's a very special day. It is Chaf Beis Shvat, Rebbetzins Yahrzeit, and it's certain that our learning the Rebbe's Torah together is is the greatest pleasure that she could have, and the greatest aliyah for her neshama. So that's first of all. Second, we are very delighted to be sharing in Simchas of our classmates the engagement of Chana's granddaughter, Chami Mishulavin, to Mendel Nemes. May they build a Bayis Neman B'Yisrael. And to share Rachi's sons, Meir and daughter-in-law Sterna, had a baby girl, L'Tayr L'Chuppah L'Masim Tevim. And today is a special day. Goldie Baumgarten's son, Ze'ev Ben Golda, is donating his kidney. It's actually the second of her sons to do this. Incredible. And both the donor and the recipient should have a refuah shlema ukreva. And this act of pure Avas Yisrael should just tip the scale and bring Mashiach immediately. We're also learning for refuah shlema for Reza Bas Shifra and Sarah Bracha Bas Esther. Our sikha today is Mishpatim Gimel Chelek Chavav. It's a sikha where the Rebbe parses the words of the Rambam regarding the topic of gerus, of conversion. And as always, just reveals for us incredible and inspiring information. Aleph. Kasav Harambam B'Sefer Hayad B'Dinei Gerus. The Rambam writes in his magnus opus in Yad HaChazaka Mishnah Torah regarding the laws of conversion. He writes, B'Shleisha Devarim Nichnesu Yisrael L'Bris Mila Utfila V'Korban. Sorry, Nichnesu Yisrael L'Bris. With three things, Jews entered into the covenant with God. They became Jewish people. B'mila with circumcision, utfila and with immersion in the mikvah, ukarban and with a sacrifice. Mila ha'isa chului, he says that the mila was in Egypt. Utfila ha'isa chului, and the immersion was right before Matan Torah. The korban and the sacrifice, shenemar, as it says, vayishlach es nari b'nei Yisrael. And this is in our parsha, and this is the connection between this sikha and Parshas Mishpatim, that they sent the youth of the Jews, Vayalu Oles Ayidei Kol Yisrael Hakrivum, and they offered sacrifices that were completely consumed through the agency, they acted in the agency of all the Jews who brought these to God. V'chein l'dairis. And the Rambam continues, and this is so for all generations, when a non-Jew will want to enter the covenant, tzarich mila, he will need to be circumcised if it's a man, utfila, and immersion, v'hartzaz, korban, and the offering of a sacrifice. Shenemar, kachem kager, you and the convert will be the same. Ma'atem b'milot tefillah v'hartzaz korban, just as you needed these three components to enter into the covenant with God. Af hager l'dairis, so it will be for the convert in all generations. B'mila, with circumcision, utfila, and immersion, v'hartzaz korban, and the offering of a korban. Then ulahalon kasav harambam b'halacha b'fnei atzma, and then the Rambam writes another halacha, la'achar shepirish mahu korban hager, after he explains what is the offering of the convert. And the Rambam writes, umahu korban hager, and what kind of sacrifice does the convert bring? Oilas behema chule. He brings a sacrifice that will be completely consumed of the animal category, because you could also bring a oila from a bird. There are different ways in which you could bring a korban oila, and And the Rambam says that it should be from a behema, from a domesticated animal. Then the Rambam says, "Uzman hazeh she'ein sham korban." And what about in our day when we cannot bring offerings? The Beis Hamikdash is no longer standing. Tzarich mila utfila. The convert needs to be circumcised and immersed. Beis Hamikdash yavi korban. And when the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt, he will bring a korban. And I just want to insert that I mean, maybe it's self-understood, but I feel like I just want to articulate this, that of course the convert has to do Kabbalas HaMitzvahs. He has to take on Ol Malchus Shemayim, the yoke of heaven. This is the formal transformation. Okay, so this is like the legalities and the protocol of the actual conversion process. But of course, all of this is predicated on taking all Malchus Shemayim, taking the yoke of heaven upon himself. I think that today this could be confusing for us because today, right before the conversion and that tafas da mila and taking a pinprick of blood, that's when the convert is asked all the questions that definitively underscore that this person is undertaking all the mitzvahs of the Torah. So that is obviously part of the process. That's the most pivotal part of the process. This is the protocol for how it happens. Now, the Rebbe says, "V'hine, mipashtus haloshen mashma." If you read this topically, simply speaking, it seems shebezman hazeh nasa ger gomer al yidei milo tefila bovad. Then in these days, when the Beis Hamikdash is not standing, a person becomes a convert into Judaism through circumcision and immersion, and just those two components. V'rak sheyesh alav chiyuv k'sheyibane Beis Hamikdash yavi korban. But he has a chiyuv, he has an obligation that when the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt, he's going to have to bring a korban. Ubevir gidrei v'tamai shel din zeh. And in explaining this rubric, this category, and the reason thereof, shebizman hazeh nasa ger gomer al yidei milo tefila bilvad, av shebizman habayis haknisa lebrisi b'shloish devarim, in explaining that in this day and age, from the fall of the Beis Hamikdash, you become a complete convert through circumcision and immersion only, even though in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, entering into the covenant necessitated the triad, the three things. The ger, shamal, v'tavel, v'adayin lehebi karbana ikva liyos ger gamor. So how do we reconcile what the Rambam is saying with what is said elsewhere, that there is this idea that the ger that was circumcised and immersed but hasn't yet brought the korban, that fact, karbanai, the fact that he hasn't brought the korban, ikvoi liyos ger gamor, it prevents him from being a complete ger. Kechol ksherei Yisrael, like all other kosher Jews or fitting Jews. Eina echel b'kachim, therefore he can't eat of sacrifices. He cannot eat the holy meat of sacrifices. She'adayin le'nase k'ksherei Yisrael, because he has not yet become like the kosher or fitting Jews. How do you reconcile these two sources? Kasav HaGoyin HaRagatchover, the Ragatchover wrote, V'zel l'shoinei, and this is his terms, this is exactly his wording, Dirak l'kdashim loy mikre adayin Yisrael gamor, that it's only in relation to eating kachim, to eating meat from sacrificial offerings, that he is not considered a complete Jew. Aval l'shar dvarim hu hava ki Yisrael l'chol davar. But anything else, he is a Jew for every other reason, for any other purpose, in any other context. V'im kain, bizman hazeh loy mechsar klal b'shvil hakarban. If this is true, the Rogatchover says, so in this day and age, when there can't be the possibility of his bringing a korban, he's not missing anything in his Jewish status because he didn't bring the korban. So how do we reconcile this idea? And the Rogatchover comes and says, it's for this one specific thing that he's not considered completely Jewish, and that is to eat kachim. But in every other way, he is a Jew. Beis, v'tzarach lahavin. Medivrei haragatchover shebizman hazeh lo mechsar klal. From the words of the Rogatchover that in this day he's not missing anything, there's no deficit in his Jewish status. Afal pisha b'negei lekachim lo mikra adayin Yisrael gamor. Irrespective of the fact that when it comes to eating kachim, he is not considered a complete Jew. Muchach l'ch'era. It's proven seemingly shekavanasa hi lekdushas Yisrael hanegas lidinim hanoihagim bisman hazeh. That the Rogatchover intends to speak about the holiness of a Jew that is within the reality of halacha that we keep today in this pre-temple era. Hainu, meaning shebizman hazeh k'shageros hi b'mila utfila bilvad. That in this day and age, when conversion necessitates circumcision and immersion, and that is all, ein kol chisaron b'kedushas Yisrael shalager. So therefore, there is no deficit in the holiness of a ger today. Ulechayra, seemingly, hein emes she'achilas kachim einu naheges bizman hazeh. It's true, nobody's eating kachim today. Aval avapikein, but still in all, hare hatam shebizman habayis ger shalahikriv karbane asur bachila zu hu kolosh narakatchaver lefish lekachim leimikra dayin Yisrael gamor. In other words, true that practically nobody's eating kachim. But the fact of the matter is that the reason why the ger who had not yet brought his korban could not eat kachim is because when it comes to kachim, within that rubric, within that construct, he is not considered a full Jew. Ein alav din Yisrael. He doesn't have the status of a Jew. V'yaser mizu, and even more, like it's written somewhere else, v'havei k'may ben noach lekachim. He is considered like a Noahite. He is considered as a non-Jew for this, for all practical purposes, for this particular thing, which is eating of kachim. So this brings us to a great wonder. How is it possible to say Shakol hageim shenizgairu mishachara beis hamikdash ubeneim kama v'chama gedolei Yisrael ein aleim din Yisrael gamor? How can you say that all the converts that converted from the time of the fall of Bayesheni of the Second Temple, included among them are some of the greatest, Gedolei Yisrael, great luminaries amongst Jews, Ein Aleim Din Yisrael Gamor, that they're not considered a complete Jew, B'yachas Linyanim Misuyamim Achilas Kachim, that when it comes to certain things, like eating from the kachim, they're not considered a full Jew. Or like it says in another place that they are considered like a Noahite. Again, only when it comes to eating kachim. But how could you say that? That seems to be a glaring deficit. And you have great, great, great people who were great luminaries. This and even more. The Rebbe drills down, Yedua Chuvas Harambam L'Reva Vadya Hager. There was a great convert. He was called Avadya Hager. Look him up on Chabad.org, where you'll be sure to get the right information, because these days, if you Google, you're going to get AI first. Not always 100% correct, but look him up. Fascinating personality. And the Rambam had quite a correspondence with him. And In the correspondence, Sheba Mivar Shemalase Shel Rabbi Ovadia, Gidoyle Yoser Mimalas Kol Shar B'nei Yisrael. The Rambam explains that Ovadia's level, his great characteristics are greater than the rest of Klal Yisrael, because he was a convert. Why? Mipnei shekol b'nei Yisrael misyachasim la'Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. Because Jews who are born Jews, their yichus, their lineage, dates back to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, to the Avos, to the patriarchs. V'ilu hagerim, but converts, misyachasim lemisha amar v'haya elam hakadosh baruch hu. But converts, what's their lineage? The one, they're straight to God, to the one who said and brought the world into existence. Val Pia Amor. So based on what we're saying, Shager Shenizgaya Bisman Hazeh, Have Legabe Inim Misuyim Keven Noyach, that a ger that converts from the time of the fall of the temple is considered a ben noyach for a particular thing, kachim. If that is true, Ech Kasav HaRambam LeRebbe Ovadia Hager Shemalase B'Yoseh Ger Gedoyle Mimala Shar B'nei Yisrael. How did the Rambam write this to Rebbe Ovadia Hager? That he has a maila, he has a great distinction that eclipses people that are born Jewish. Upashut betachlis shelo yitachen shekasav harabam chas v'sholem davar she'ena mechuvan l'teres emes. And the Rebbe says it's simple. It should go without saying that the Rambam would not write, God forbid, anything that is not 100% aligned with the intention of the true Torah. Just to encourage and to console and to massage the ego of Rebbe Ovadia Ger. You can't say that about the Rambam. So how do you reconcile the fact that for the purpose of eating kachim, the ger is considered incomplete? In another place it says he's considered a ben noyach within the context of eating kachim. And here the Rambam is writing to Rebbe Ovadia Ger that the stature, the spiritual stature of a ger transcends spiritual stature of people born Jewish. And let's also bring to our attention what the Rambam continues in that correspondence to write to Rebbe Ovadia Hager. He writes, "V'chol ma she'amarnu lecha be'inyan habrachos shelo tishana kfar raya lazeh," and everything that I wrote to you about that nothing will change in the blessings, there's a proof of this. Commotion Asparish B'Yerushalmi Bikurim. So he's bringing a proof to Rebbe Ovadia Hager that there are no changes in the liturgy for a ger, and he brings this proof from the Yerushalmi, where it writes about Bikurim, about the first fruits that had to be brought to the Beis Hamikdash. Tane b'shem Rabbi Yehuda, that were taught in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Ger atzmei mevi bikurim, a convert brings bikurim, v'koire es nusach havidui, and he reads the conventional liturgy surrounding the proclamation that the Jew had to bring when he brought bikurim. My taima, why would this be the fact? Why would he say that my fathers, etc., when he's a ger? Ki av hamoin goyim nisaticha. Because Hashem said to Avraham Avinu, I made you a father over all the nations. Av l'chol habriyos, a father over all of creations. Hinei nisbar lecha. So then it's clear to you that this is what the ger does when he brought bikurim, and therefore the Rambam is bringing a proof from that for the ger that became a ger after the fall of the Mikdash. And it's not just something he wrote to Rebbe Ovadia Hager in correspondence. And he brings this down, he adjudicates this practically. Hager mevi v'kairei, the convert brings bikurim, and he reads the liturgy that every Jew reads among, and within that it says shenemar, as it says, Lavram, Av Hamoin Goyim Nisaticha. Harehu Av, Kol Ha'ilam Kulei, Shenichnasin Tachas Kanfei Shechina Chulei. Sorry, I made a mistake. The Rambam paskins that the ger brings the Bikurim, he reads the liturgy. Why does he read the liturgy, which would seemingly make it sound like he was born into a long line of Jews? Shenemar, because it says in the Torah, Avram, Hashem says to Avram, Av Hamoin Goyim Nisaticha. I made you the patriarch for many nations. So he is the father for the entire world, for all people, that come under the wings of Hashem's presence. V'hainu, this means, Shehevi Rambam Rayil Rabavadia B'Hanagase Bizman Hazeh, Miger Bizman Abayis. That means that the Rambam is comparing a person that becomes a ger after the Churban to a ger in the time of temple of the Beis Hamikdash. So again, how do we square all of this? On one hand, it seems that the ger seems to be missing something very, very important. On the other hand, the Rambam is saying to Rabbi Vadia, Hager, your spiritual stature transcends the stature of people who are born Jewish. So is there a deficit? Seems to be a deficit. Can't eat kachim. He's considered a ben noach for the purpose of kachim. On the other hand, there is this superiority, this tremendous greatness. Gimel. So the Rebbe says, perhaps we can explain it this way. L'chayra, seemingly, we can say, Deloy kediver ragat she'isur hager lechel bekachim kol zman shelahibi karbonei hu mepnei. I'm sorry. Okay. I haven't slept that much. Full disclosure, I am sorry. I'm not being smooth this morning. Okay, starting again. Gimel. L'chayra, seemingly, haya'efshar loymar. We might possibly say, Deloy kediver ragat not like the Ragat, but to say differently, to explain this whole concept differently. She'isar hager lechel bekachim kol zman shelehevi karbonai, that the reason why the ger can't eat of kachim, of meat that was consecrated as part of a korban, as long as he has not brought the specific korban that he has to bring, that's part of the conversion protocol or process, should be understood. And here the Rebbe brings down a term from the Gemara, Sha'aryehu dirvia aleha, that this is like a lion crouching upon it. What does this mean? That you want to get to a certain area, but there's a lion that's blocking you. It's crouching and it's blocking you, and you can't. You don't want to poke a sleeping lion. Okay, so you're being blocked. So the Rebbe brings down this terminology, and he says, what's going on here? Havas hakorban, the korban that the convert has to bring as part of the conversion process, rivia, it's crouching. It's like the lion that's crouching. It's ma'akeves. It prevents this convert milechel bekachim, from eating from consecrated meat. Hainu, this means. Sha'isur dachilas kachim einay mitzad chisarin begavra begeirusay. Okay, this is extremely important. Rebbe is explaining that the reason that he can't eat from kachim is not because there is some deficit in his status as a Jew. Ella shadavar tztidi. It's a tangential thing. It's like, it's not that the house doesn't belong to you. It's that a lion came and laid down in front of the door. How are you going to get in? It doesn't make you less of an owner, but there's an obstruction. There's an impediment here. What are you going to do? So Rebbe says that's what you have to understand what's going on here with this convert. The fact that he can't eat from kachim is because he didn't bring a korban. But the korban is peripheral to his spiritual stature. He is still a ger. Hachiyuv, the havaz korban. But the chiyuv, the obligation to bring a korban, Mainai, it prevents him me'achilas kachim from eating consecrated meat. Va'adraba, and on the contrary, not only is this not a deficit in his stature, but now we're going to understand al pizeh yumtak lashon harambam. Now we're going to be able to understand so much better the exact terminology of what the Rambam is saying here. Because what does the Rambam say? He says, Sh'adayin lo'inase kichshere Yisrael. He is not yet like Chshere Yisrael. Now, the word Chshere can mean ready, fitting, capable of, ripe. In other words, it's not about who you are, it's about do you have the capacity to do something at that time. Chshere Yisrael hugami lashon kosher umuchshar. Is this thing ready? Is it licensed for? Is it fitting? Kiloimar, that is to say, Kol's man hevi karbonai, af shehu Yisrael gamor. As long as he hasn't brought his korban, although he is considered completely a Jew, mikol makayim, still in all, einoi muchshar lachilas kachim. He's not licensed to eat kachim. And the Rebbe brings down a parallel to this in halacha. Al derech, this can be compared to milas bana v'avodav, for a person to be able to bring a korban pesach. Their children that needed milah, their children that needed circumcision had to be circumcised, and their servants on their estate also had to be circumcised. And if this was not the case, it would prevent this Jew, who is completely a Jew, from bringing the korban pesach, and it prevents him me'achilas pesach, and from eating the paschal lamb. And it's clear that there's no deficit in the gavra, in the person himself. He's 100% Jewish. It's a chesaron Yisrael Gomor. But, and there's no chesaron, there's no lack in the fact that he's completely a Jew. But he is not able to bring or eat from a korban pesach without everybody under his kind of supervision, or anybody that belongs to him that needs a bris milah not having had the bris milah. So the Rebbe is saying this is how we should understand the halacha about the convert. He can't eat from kachim because he hasn't brought his korban, but it doesn't make him less of a Jew. And now it becomes reconciled what the Rambam wrote to Rabbi Vadia Gager, she'ein ma'alasei pechusa mishar b'nei Yisrael, that his stature is not any less than the rest of Jews. Va'adraba, on the contrary, he wrote to him that his spiritual stature is higher. Afal pishahu asur b'achilas kachim ad sheyavi karbanei, and this is true even though he cannot eat kachim until he brings his korban. Why? Ki iser achilas hakachim hu mitzadavar tzdidi v'chitzayni. Because the prohibition on eating the consecrated meat is, again, it's peripheral, it's tangential, and it's external mehagavra, from the person himself. Ukinal, and the Rebbe says, as said above, this should be understood as aryehu derivia aleha, like a lion that is crouching on a certain area, and therefore you can't get through, you can't get in, you can't get there. But again, that's peripheral to what's going on. But the Rebbe says, but there's still a little problem. Aval al pihano, based on everything we've explained, tzarich iyun katan b'lashon harambam. We still need to further probe the exact terminology of the Rambam just a little bit. And what's the exact terminology of the Rambam? Shekarbana ikvay liyas ger gamor. That the lack of bringing the sacrifice prevents him from being a complete convert. And because of this, he doesn't eat from the consecrated meat. Dimashma, because from this, it seems that we're learning, we're understanding, it's implied, that as long as he doesn't bring the carbon, his conversion is not complete. So even though the Rebbe has given us a way of understanding it, but the Rebbe says we still need to probe this, because the Rambam writes that his gerus is not complete. So what are we saying? That every single convert into the Jewish faith from the time of the Korban Beis Hamikdash is not a complete ger? Can't be. Dalit. And we might say the explanation is as follows. Kavanas Lashon HaRambam, Shekarbonai Ikvoi Lies Ger Gamor. The intention of what the Rambam is saying with these words, that his korban, meaning lack thereof, the lack of bringing the korban, prevents him from being a complete ger. And the fact that the Rambam wrote it like this, V'loi b'lashon shel chiyuv, and he didn't write it in a positive way. The Rambam could have written, Shah korban oisa ger gamor. That it's the korban that makes him a complete ger. But the Rambam didn't say that. Or the Rambam could have said that the korban migairai, that it's the korban that actually, flips the switch, converts him. But the Rambam didn't say that. So what's the kavana? What's the Rambam's intention by very specifically writing that the korban prevents him from being a complete ger, instead of saying the korban is what makes him a complete ger? What's the intention? He loy shahavas hakarban oisa lager gamor. With this, the Rambam is broadcasting to us that it's not the bringing of the korban that makes him a complete ger. Hainu shalidei milo utfila naase Yisrael rak l'shar hadvorim v'al yidei korban chololav din Yisrael gam legabe kachim. The Rambam is not saying with this that the circumcision and the immersion make him a Jew for all other purposes, and the bringing of the korban completes the circuit, and now he's a ger when it comes to kachim, to consecrated meat. Kiyim, but rather, the Rambam is saying, she'i havas hakorban me'akvasai milios ger gomer be'inyan zeh. That the lack of bringing the korban prevents him or interferes with his becoming a ger, a complete ger, for all purposes inclusive of this. And the Rebbe says, "Ve'ein zeh stir lekach miloshen Rambam b'shloisha dvarim nichnasu Yisrael lebris milo tefila v'korban." And this is not a contradiction, because you might raise this objection. Wait a minute. We brought down the words of the Rambam, and he said that it is with three things that a Jew enters into the covenant: with circumcision, with immersion, and with the korban, with the offering. The chen l'dairis. And he brought down that the Rambam says, and this is true for all generations, likanis l'bris, tzarach milo utfila v'hartzas korban. You'll need to have circumcision, immersion, and bring a korban. Seemingly, it seems that the Rambam is implying that you need all three things. Mm-hmm. The Rebbe says, no, you have to understand this properly. The Rebbe says like this: in order to enter into the covenant, there need to be two actions, two things. There has to be davar hamachnis. There has to be the thing that brings you into the covenant. And then there has to be the removal of those things that are acting as an obstruction, as an impediment, that are blocking and preventing the person from coming in. Bidugmas orlas benoy va'avadoi bekorban Pesach. Like, for example, the person who can't bring the korban Pesach and can't eat from a korban Pesach because his son has not been circumcised or his servants have not been circumcised. Ubepashtos, to say it simply, Keshem shachnasas davar misuyim l'teich bayis ukayetz bezet tluya gam bahasaras davar ha'arye hanimtza bachutz uma'akev knisa l'bayis. Just like if you wanted to bring a couch into the house. Bringing the couch into the house would be dependent on taking away what is blocking the door, the lion that's crouching by the door and is preventing person from coming to the house or bringing stuff in. Upashut, so it's simple. Shasaras hadavar hama'akev eina chelek mehadavar ha'pu'ula machnis. So while it's true that you have to get the lion away from there, you have to call it ASPCA or whatever, but that is not part of what you want to bring into the house. You want to bring in a couch. You live in the house, you want to bring in a couch, a dining room table, whatever you want to do. Your children, your grandchildren. It's true you have to take away the lion, but that's not really central to what you're trying to do, which is to get things into the house. So it's with what we're discussing. Lashon harambam he. The exact words of the Rambam is Bishloisha devarim nichnesu Yisrael labris, or lihikones labris. There are three facets to entering the covenant as a Jew. V'loi shloisha devarim hichnisu es Yisrael labris, lachnisai labris ukayetza bazeh. And he doesn't say that it's three things that bring the Jew into the covenant. He says there are three things that are part of Jews entering into the covenant. Ki aknisa labris, because entering into the covenant, achein ba al yedei zeh sheniskaimu shlosha devarim. It's true that three things have to happen for a Jew to come into the bris. How does it happen? Three things have to happen. Mila, utfila, v'hartzas, korban. Those three things have to happen. But these three things have to happen. There's two separate categories. There's hadavar hamachnis bevris. There's the fact that you want to bring in a couch. Okay? You want to bring somebody into the covenant, you need mila and tefillah. They're a man, they need to be circumcised. A woman is born circumcised, and they need to be immersed. Then there's hasara sa'aryeh. Then you have to take away the lion that has decided to park in front of your door. Hadavra hama'akev esaknisa. That which is preventing you from bringing what you want to bring into the house. Hartzaz hakarbane, hartzaz karban. In this case, it's the bringing of the sacrifice. Ba'al pizeh. Okay, this gets really interesting. Bisman hazeh, in this day and age, kishe'ein korban al pi Torah, when there is no possibility of bringing a korban, ein davar hama'akev. There's nothing that obstructs this person. There's no lion. V'lachein al yidei mila utfila nasa ger gomor. So the male convert is a complete convert through circumcision and immersion. And in alignment with the words of the Ragachover, Gain, he is not missing anything. There is no deficit. We might say, and once he becomes a complete convert, he remains that way forever. Al derech shematzinu psak din, as we find, there is a psak, there is the halacha is adjudicated, she'im chazar l'surei, that if you have a convert who stops being observant, din Yisrael, he remains Jewish, elashu Yisrael mumar, but he is a Jew who's like an apostate. He went off the halachic road but he still remains Jewish. Ukashay bana beis hamikdash b'meherav yameinu. And when the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt speedily in our day, harehu mutar ba'achilas kachim gam koidem sheyavi korban. This ger is going to be able to eat the consecrated meat from karbanes even before he brings his karban. Why? Kevan shekvar nasa ger gomer kechol ksheri Yisrael. Because he became a complete ger like all other Jews that are fitting to eat kachim. Ubesignen achar Valderech hamusar. Rebbe says if you want to approach this from a different vantage point, in a different style, from an ethical perspective, ein makam loimer sheyavai ezigiroin bikdushasai mipnei shenivne beis hamikdash. How could you say that there should be some disadvantage that is attributed to the holiness of a ger because the Beis Hamikdash was built? In other words, the building of the Beis Hamikdash has to bring holiness and perfection and elevation to everything. It's not possible to conceive that the building of the Beis Hamikdash would demote a ger from one category to another. That until the building of the Beis Hamikdash, he was like every other Jew because he can't bring a korban, what are you going to do? But once the Beis Hamikdash is built, now he's demoted. He's going to have to bring a korban. Only then could he eat kachim. No, the Rebbe says he's going to be able to eat kachim like every other Jew. Hey, v'yesh leimar, we might say shadin zeh, this halacha shager shenispayer bismana zeh nasa ger gomor, that a convert that converts in this day and age becomes a complete convert. Gam le'inyan achilas kachim, inclusive of the fact that when the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt, he will be able to eat kachim even before he brings a korban that has to do with his conversion. Ramzai harambam b'dinya hagirish behilchas isuri bia. The Rambam alludes to this in a different place in his Mishnah Torah when he talks about forbidden sexual relationships and he talks about converts. Betchila kasav, at the beginning he writes, Kishayirta akum likanes bevriz, that when a non-Jew will want to enter into the covenant of the Jews, tzarech mila utfila batas karban, he needs circumcision, immersion, and to bring a korban. And later he adds in a different halacha, and in this day and age, in this pre-temple era, where there's no possibility to bring a korban, he needs circumcision and immersion. And from the Rambam's specific terminology, Bisman hazeh, in this day, mashma, we understood. Sha'aknisa lebris bisman hazeh, he oisa haknisa lebris. That when a person becomes a convert in this day and age, it is exactly the same entrance into the covenant. Ella shiba ifanacher. But it happens a little bit differently. Hainu, meaning, shebizman hazeh nasis oisa haknisa lebris aide milot tefillah. That today, the same process, or the same transformation occurs. He becomes a ger, but there's no korban. Hine kevan she'ein korban hama'akev nasa ger gamor aide milot fila bilvat. This means that the korban, like the Rebbe explained earlier, is ma'akev. It blocks, it prevents, it impedes the process for a specific thing, but it's not central to his becoming a ger. And therefore today, he is considered a complete ger. And what about the fact that the Rambam continues to say there, that when the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt, he should bring a korban. Yesh Leimar, the Rebbe says, Shadvarim kipshutam, simply. This is a new halacha, and it's self-standing, independent. It's the chiyuv d'havas korban. In other words, he is a complete ger. period, exclamation point. A new halacha, when the Beis Hamikdash is built, he's going to have to bring a korban. Aval gam koidim sheyavi karbanai hu mutar b'achilas kachim. But even before he brings that korban, he's going to be permitted to eat the kachim, the consecrated meat, as said above, kevan shekvar nasa ger gamor, because he became a complete ger. Now, the Rebbe is going to further explain this and going to start to bring in the Pnimius HaTorah here. Vav. V'hazbar b'chiluk hanal. An explanation in the aforementioned distinction between the two aspects of the three parts of conversion. There are two aspects that bring him in, and there is one thing that has to be removed, like that lion that has to be removed from the door. So the two things that bring the person into the covenant with Hashem as a Jew is Mila and Tvila. And then there's another thing, another category, and that is what has to be removed. Okay. So the Rebbe says that the explanation of this, the difference between these two categories, that it's specifically circumcision and immersion that bring the person into the covenant. In contradistinction, hakorban, the bringing of the korban, who hasaras ha'aryeh shebachutz. It's taking away the lion that is outside of the door. Davar mibachutz shema'akev. It's something external that is causing a blockage. So hold on, Elsa. The Rebbe is going to, I think, speak to what you're trying to say, I think. And if not, then let me know and we'll discuss what you're saying. The Rebbe says like this. The process of somebody becoming a Jew through conversion has two basic components. Al derech shnei inyanim shahayu begeras haklolish shel kol bnei Yisrael, and this aligns, or this is modeled after, the two general aspects that brought the Jews into nationhood to begin with. Be'es matan Torah. Jews had to undergo a conversion because before that, it's true, they were the children of the Avos and the Imahis, but they were not a Jewish nation. They were a tribe, a motley crew, whatever you want to call them, but they were not Am Yisrael. So there had to be, and this is the way the Torah refers to it, Va'avi eschem elai, ve'yisem li segula mikol ha'amim. I'm going to bring you to me, and you're going to be my beloved from amongst all the nations. Separate, and later, va'achar kach, there's the second aspect, mamleches koyanim v'goy kadosh. You're going to become a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Bisignon achaktas, or if you want to say this a little bit different stylistically. Aleph, first there's etzem krisas habris beinoi laHashem. First, there's the essential covenant that is forged between this person and God. Hanasis alidezeh shenichnis boy nefesh dikdusha. How does this happen? How is this covenant forged? Through this holy soul that comes into him. That's, you could say, like the first step. Beis, then there's Shinui Hagavra. Then there's the transformation that occurs in the person. Kasher hanefesh dikdusha chayderes beivore v'koiches nafshay. When the holy soul suffuses his bones, his limbs, and all the aspects and the energies of his soul, and makes them into a new entity. Okay, Step one, the soul goes into him. And that mirrors I'm going to bring you to me, and you're going to be my beloved people from all the nations. Step two is the way in which this transforms the person, the way in which this transformed all of Klal Yisrael, that they became a mamlachas koyanim v'goy kadosh, a new entity, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And now we're in a position to understand the difference between circumcision and immersion, and that third aspect of bringing the korban. So you could say that the first aspect of conversion comes from above and it's superimposed on the person. And then there's a transformation that is from the inside out. And this is a difference between Mila and Tefillah and bring the korban. Milo Tefillah, Payales Knisas Nefesh HaKadosh Beger. The circumcision and the immersion effectuate the entrance of the holy soul into the convert. Hamila. And now in this, there's two aspects. There's Hamila Hasaras Ha'arla Maitzia Oise Mitumas Akum. The circumcision, the taking away of the foreskin, takes this person out of the impurity of non-Jewish nations. The hatvila and the immersion, machnisa oisei l'kedushas Yisrael, brings him into the holiness of the Jewish people. Masha einkein havaz korban but the bringing of a korban is a different thing. It's dairon umincha lavaya lasas loy nachas ruach. It's a present. It's an offering to God, to give to God pleasure. Korban miloshen kiruv. Korban, the word korban, is etymologically rooted in the word to come close. Kiruv hakoiches v'hachushim. It's about bringing close to God the energies and powers and the talents that you've been vested with. Hadavar poel kiruv koichesav chule laHashem. The bringing of this korban causes the closeness of this person's kaiches, their energies, their abilities to Hashem. V'hainu, this means sheshinui hamohu shaloi mekarvoi elav yisbarach kevan shenasa al yedei zeh mehus ben shekarev lemehus aviv. So he becomes a convert through two aspects that we spoke about. Then there's the korban, and what happens? There's an internal transformation that brings him close to Hashem. He becomes essentially a son, a child that is close to the essence of his father. Now the Rebbe says, once we understand what the korban is, now we're in a position, Valpizeh, Yuva, now we're in a position to understand Hachiluk ben Zman Habayis l'Zman Hazeh. And this is really quite moving and poignant. Zman Habayis Bechlal Hayazman Shel Gilui Elokus V'Shachanti B'Seichem. The time of the Beis Hamikdash was a time of tremendous revelation and exposure of godliness. Hashem said, I'm going to rest among you. Like the Mishnah says, Asara Nisim Nasu B'Beis Hamikdash, there were 10 huge miracles that occurred in the Beis Hamikdash, the Chulei, etc. And so, given the reality of what that was, so given the tremendous revelation of godliness at that time, what was the Jews' main avodah? To work with the revealed and the internal aspects of their spiritual landscape. Havana v'hasaga be'elokus. It was about trying to understand and grasp godliness. It was about higher and higher in avas Hashem, in loving God, v'yirasai, and in being in awe of Hashem. V'lachein gam knisasei shel ger lebris haise ba'ifin gazeh shenidrash ini shel karban kiruv hakoiches. And therefore, to become a ger, you had to do what the rest of the Jews were doing. You had to bring your inner persona, all the aspects of who you are, close to Hashem. That was the avodah of the Jews at that time. And so therefore, that is reflected in the process of conversion. Mashe ein kain, in contradistinction, bismana golos, in the time of golos, in the time of exile, kasher oisesenu loira inu, we don't see signs, we don't see miracles. Hashem is not manifest in that way. V'ikra avodahu, and in the main, our spiritual service is loikol kach bizgalus hakoiches hapnim yuchule. It's not so much about revealing the innermost aspects of our spiritual persona. Ki'im ba'asiya b'poyel mitach bitul v'ismasrus laHashem. But in the main, the avodah today is about abnegation of the self and dedicating yourself to Hashem. Kabbalas ol, mesiras nefesh, doing it because you're accepting Hashem's yoke upon you, and you will do it with mesiras nefesh, you will do it with self-sacrifice. Hinei keinu gam beger. So since this is the avodah of this time, kol zman, for as long as we don't have the Beis HaMikdash, it should be any moment now. So this same thing is being reflected in how a person becomes a ger these days. She'etzem knisas nefesh hakdosh al yidei milot tefillah, that the very fact that a holy soul has entered into him through, of course, he accepts all the mitzvahs, and then the formalities. He has the circumcision, and he is immersed in the mikvah. I want to just make clear, by saying the formalities, I didn't mean to say in any way, chas v'shalom, that they're not important. I'm saying that this is the formal entrance, right? So that pa'eles by es hagerus, krisas habris makadosh baruch hu, bishleimus loy mechsar klal. He becomes completely a ger. There is no deficit. There is nothing lacking. Because he becomes a ger in a way that aligns with the general avodah of a Jew in the time where there's no Beis HaMikdash, which is less about the avodah of korban and is more about bittul, self-dedication, kabbalas ol, mesiras nefesh. In the main, we're not basking in the rays of holiness. We are putting one foot in front of the other. Every single day we get up and we say, Hashem, we are yours. You're hiding, and we don't see you clearly, but we're doing this. Zayin. Yeah, it relates to women. The Gemara says that women are born circumcised. And you don't need to circumcise those who are circumcised already. Aliza, that's to you. Umikan yesh lilmaid hara l'chol Yisrael. Now the Rebbe says, lest you think that this is just an exercise in intellectual inquiry. We're just, we're talking about Gerim. Interesting. The Rebbe says, no. This teaches us something profound about every single Jew. Hagerus dechlal Yisrael hisakanal beis matan Torah. There was a mass conversion of all the children of Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov, Rachel, and Leah, beis matan Torah, when they came to accept the Torah. Ukashem she'inyam matan Torah hu pu'ula nimsheches b'chol yom v'yom. And just like Every single day we have to receive the Torah anew. Every single morning, we're not allowed to learn Torah before we make a bracha, birchas haTorah, and we say Noisein haTorah. Presently, Hashem is giving us the Torah. Al derech ze muvan shegam ma shenichnesu lebris inyan hanimshach b'chol yom v'yom. So just like the Jews had to enter into the covenant and become gerim, that is something we have to do every day. And as Rashi says on the words, and today you became a nation, Rashi says, B'chol yom yiyu beinecha kilo hayom basa imay bevris. Every single day it should be in your eyes, meaning you should feel, you should live with this, that today you came into a covenant with Hashem. V'yisera mizu. And the Rebbe says, again, don't think I'm just talking in some theological, theoretic, abstruse, philosophical way. Actually, even more so, me'ein inin hageres yeshin b'chol yom. Every Jew actually undergoes something that very subtly is a kind of conversion every day. How so? Yedua, it's known, Habir b'masha anu mevarchim b'chol yom bircha shlo yasani goy. What's the explanation that every single day a Jew gets up and says, thank you that you didn't make me a goy, that you didn't make me of the other nations. Dilachayra, seemingly, me'acha she'adam noilad Yisrael, shuv lo yitachein kol shini b'zeh. We know famously, if you're born Jewish, that can never change. Shuv lo yitachen kol sheni b'zeh v'im kain. So if we know that this is an inviolable fact about a Jew, no matter what you do, you'll always be a Jew. Ma makim levarach al kach bracha b'chol yom. So why would you make a bracha on this every day? From the moment you were born Jewish. That is the case. It will always be the case. What's the news flash? Thank you, Hashem, that you didn't make me a guy. Umevor b'shulchan aruch. Alter Rebbe brings down a Shulchan Aruch, Shabircha Shelo Yasani Goy. That this bracha, Shelo Yasani Goy, and in parentheses, the Rebbe says, Valderech says, Shelo Yasani Aved, Shelo Yasani Isha. This is true for the other two blessings that are in this kind of cohort. He al Yitzias Nishmasai Belayla Shelo Nidbak Boy Nishmas Nachri. This is really quite fascinating. Why do you get up and make this bracha? Because every night your neshama leaves you. And now you're blessing Hashem that no non-Jewish soul adhered itself to you. Shelo Yasani Goy. It's not a simple thing that you went to sleep, your neshama left you, and you woke up and you're a Jew. And there's no other neshama that either attached itself to you or in any other way impacts you. Zoisameres, this means. Shechnisas hanefesh hakdosha shel adam Yisrael b'chol yom v'yom hi inyan shel chidush. The Rebbe says the fact that the holy neshama of a Jew comes back into them every day. This is a monumental and novel thing. Ad kedei kach shetzarich levarach bracha shelo nidbak boi nishmas nachri. It is so important. It is so monumental. It is so not something that we should take for granted that we actually get up and we make a bracha. V'nimtza, so this means shebachol yom knisas hanefesh hakdosha b'Yisrael hi me'ein inyan hagerus. So essentially, what's going on here? Every single day we are being vested with our Jewish soul. It's a conversion of sorts. It's like knisas hanefesh hakdosha b'pam harishona. It's like the first time you get your holy soul. This is really meirdek. It's something that we have to sit on. We have to really appreciate. Ches. Balkach ba hayra. So once we understand that, the lesson is clear. Because for every Jew, there is the entrance of the Holy Soul every day. ומטעם זה כל יהודי יכול ויסר מזו כל יהודי מחויב לברך ברכה שלא יעשני גוי בכל יום ויום, או בלי שום ספק וספק ספקה בעולם שאין זו חס ושלום ברכה לבטלה. The Rebbe says, it's for this reason that you can, nay, you must, you're obligated to say the bracha shelo yasani goy every day, and there is no question, there is no doubt that this is not a bracha levatala, a bracha made for naught. Making a bracha levatala is a very, 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 very serious thing. So you can't just get up and make a bracha because it's cute. The Rebbe says, no, you're obligated because you're actually getting your Jewish neshama again. Haresha hageretz v'habrisbein adam yisrael l'kudsha brichu hein bishleimus loy mechsar klal. And again, the Rebbe is underscoring that the gerus, the covenant, is complete. Nothing is missing. Obalash Chazal, and the Rebbe never tired of citing this teaching, Yisrael, afal pi shechata, Yisraelhu. Once a Jew, always a Jew, no matter what he sins, what he does, what he doesn't do. Chetav shel ish Yisrael, yechaylem lifgoim rak b'his galu shel nefes hakdusha. The sins of a Jew are only able to impact or to cause a flaw in the revealed aspect of the Holy Soul. That is to say, through keeping Torah mitzvahs, the Holy Soul resides and illuminates this person. And then the Torah mitzvahs brings him to a place where his closeness to Hashem is open and manifest. Masha Enkain, in contradistinction, in contrast, Yisrael Shachata, a Jew that sins, Nafshay Hakdosha Nimtzeis by Behelem Mechusa Beruach Shtush Shenichtnesa. Boy. So what's the difference between a Jew who's keeping Torah mitzvahs and a Jew that's not? The Jew that's keeping Torah mitzvahs, it's open and manifest that he is close to God. The Jew that's not, that closeness is obscured, it's obfuscated. It's shrouded by the Ruach Shtos, by the spirit of folly that came into him. But look in the parentheses, the Rebbe says, Hainu Shabam mi bachutz. It's external to him. Nebach, this spirit of folly entered him. It's got nothing to do with who he is essentially, inherently, internally. And therefore, even at that time where he's doing all kinds of sins, Yisraelhu, he's a Jew. Because once a person is Jewish, the Rebbe says the word Yisrael is comprised of two words, Li, Reish. I have the head. I have the head of Hashem, meaning Hanefesh HaKadosh Kanal, Hare Habris Beinoi LaHashem, Hager Shalai, his holy soul, his conversion, his covenant between him and Hashem, Shal Yada Hu Nasel Yisrael, through whose agency he became Jewish, he b'milua ubishlei musa, no matter how many sins this person does, that covenant is complete. It is consummate. Loi mechsar klal. He's not missing anything. These are the words from Tanya. That even when a Jew sins, the neshama is always loyal to Hashem. It's an external facade. But internally, the neshama is aligned and loyal to Hashem. Payel hadavar seif kol sof al kol echad miyisrael, shenishmasei teiti b'taver l'dei gili, because essentially that bond and that covenant is complete. the neshama is always loyal to Hashem, this causes that saf kol saf, at the end, for every Jew, it's true that their soul will emerge and will become revealed. Kipsak din HaTorah, like the Torah says, Hilchos Talmud Torah Admar Zaken, the Alter Rebbe brings down, Lo yidach mimenu nidach. Nobody will be lost to Hashem. Ubevadai soifai la'aseh tshuva. And for sure, every Jew will do teshuvah. Ad asher ken yeh b'chlal Yisrael, until this will be true, not just for individuals, but for all of Klal Yisrael, kipsak din, like the Rambam brings down in Hilchos Tshuva, hifticha Torah, the Torah promises us, sheseif Yisrael laseis tshuva, that in the end, all Jews will do teshuvah. And the Rebbe says, Yisrael eisen tshuva, Jews do tshuva, umiyad hein nigolin, and immediately they are redeemed. Begeula ha'amitis v'hal shlema aydei Mashiach tzekenu, through the redemption that is true and complete through the agency of the righteous Mashiach. Va'az yikuim hayud, and then will come the fulfillment of the promise, the prophecy, the charati et beis Yisrael, bris chadasha. I will forge with the house of Israel a new covenant, sheba ein makam l'chol helem v'shinui. In that covenant, there will be no possibility for it to be hidden, for there to be any changes, and there should be bimhera b'yameinu mamash. There should be speedily in our
Amen.
days, in our minutes, mamash, literally.
Amen.
Amen.
That's the sicha for today. I don't know if Tzippa's on to close the recording, as she usually does. So I don't know if we want to have a farbrengen, then we should just be aware that it's being recorded.